Okay, and so all of these cladograms are just different ways to show relatedness or the evolutionary history of a species. That's the study of phylogenetics as phylogeny. And so what we can do with these, their graphs, essentially, is take anything that has an intersection and say that there is some sort of something that is a common ancestor. Now, sometimes it's not really a common ancestor, but more like a species characteristic. So where we talked about the robins, like forever ago, there was the European robin and the American robin. There is something between those two where there was a difference, there was a split, but in the middle, it may not necessarily be like another robin, but a characteristic that was lost or gained. And so each time that there's an intersection, we're showing some sort of common, we say a common ancestor, but it could just be a characteristic. It could be a totally fictitious organism. It may not even be real. But what those intersections show us is that there is some sort of relatedness where the characteristics have changed. Oh, I lost my mouse. So, a fun little snapshot I stole from an Amoeba Sisters video, I think does a really good job of explaining what characteristics something has in a cladogram. So if you imagine a cladogram as being one big major highway. So here's your highway. We'll call it 235. And along 235, there are side roads that you have to take sometimes if you can't get through. And there are these check marks or checkpoints, there's stoplights, stop signs, whatever you want to use, that you have to have certain characteristics to get through those spots. So if you're this little guy here, and say you're driving down your main highway or 235, and you get to the stoplight that says fuzzy tail. If you do not have a fuzzy tail, you have to take the side road that is the long way around. If you do have a fuzzy tail, you get to keep going. So this guy doesn't really have a fuzzy tail, so he doesn't get to go. But we keep going with, say, his cousin. And his cousin has big ears. So he gets to make it through, but one of his other cousins doesn't, so he has to take the side road. Then as he's driving, if you have whiskers, you get to make it through this stoplight. If not, you have to pull over and take the long way around. Does everyone understand how those stoplights or those checkpoints work? Yes or no? Okay. Then another way to look at this that sometimes helps you is in this green bubble, everything in the green bubble has a fuzzy tail, including the guys that have big ears and the guys that have whiskers. Organisms B, C, D, and E are all in the green, therefore they all have a fuzzy tail. Does A have a fuzzy tail? No. Okay, and everything inside the blue mark, C, D, and E, all have big ears. Does B have big ears? No. And then everything inside the purple mark, or D and E, they each have whiskers. But do they have a fuzzy tail? Yeah, they have a fuzzy tail. Okay, because they're included here. And those circles get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Questions so far? Okay, then I'm going to let Bozeman Science help us out a little bit. We're going to click and pause, click and pause. Oh, and now just push the button with the light on. It's closest to me.
Hi, it's Mr. Anderson, and in this podcast I'm going to talk about the cladogram. Cladogram is essentially taking characteristics that are shared by organisms and then putting together a hypothesis of how you think they may be related, or a phylogenetic tree. It's not a phylogenetic tree, it's just a guess at how that might occur. And so luckily I was just working in some pond water yesterday, and I discovered these 7 creatures, and I've named them after myself, of course. They're called Andersenia aquaticus, and they're all subspecies of that. But basically they have a lot of different characteristics. And so if we were to put those together in a cladogram, well, when you were growing up, you probably watched Sesame Street, and they used to play a game called One of These Things Is Not Like the Other. And so
okay, do you guys know the game, One of These Things Is Not Like the Other? No. Okay, so if I line up this marker, this pencil, and the scissors, which one is not like the other? The scissors, because these 2 things draw, right? What if I picked up, hold on, I'm looking. This brown pencil and this brown pencil and the white pencil from before. Which one of these things is not like the other? The white. These 2 are all pencils, but these 2 are brown. This one is white. Okay, that is the idea of the game behind one of these things is not like the other. So if we could pick the one thing out of all 9 of these, or 7, 8, I can't math, 7. Sorry, itch. Which one is not least like any of the other ones? C. So we're gonna call this one number 1. And we're gonna put him first in line. Okay, now except for letter C, which one of these things is not like the other now?
B.
B, why? It doesn't have an eye, so it's not like any of the others, but how is it different than C?
Circle.
It's a circle. Okay, good. Now, crossing out organisms B and C, which one of these things is not like the other now?
G.
G, why do you say that?
Spike.
Okay. Now what? Which one of these things is not like the others?
D.
D, because we've got an eye, but no spikes. On this one, we don't have spikes. Now what? Oops, sorry, I forgot to put 4. A, you think A is next?
Yeah.
Why?
No,
It doesn't have a red eye. Good point. All right, now what? F? Why F? Okay.
Wait, wouldn't that be? Yeah, well, because A and F are kind of alike more than it is with E.
Say that one more time.
A and F are more alike than E and or A.
It's not more of.
And A.
There's only one thing.
And E. I don't know. I mean, we can.
No, it's F and E.
You want to make a second one? So, C, B, G, D, and what do you want to say? A, then E?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right. We can change it up. All right, and then that would put us last on this bottom one with what letter? E. All right. And up here it would put us with F, right, Frosty?
Yeah.
All right, so we've got 2
Maybe you're right.
potential,
That'd be a first.
I see what you do.
2 potential cladograms. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's see.
that's a good way to think about a cladogram. And so basically, which of these doesn't look like the others? Which of these is an outgroup? Well, you should be able to figure this out. First one would be C, and then try to guess before I actually click on it. The next one that would branch off according to this would be B, because it doesn't have an I, but we're going to have that in G. So next would be G. If I play along with me, what's going to be the next one? That's right, it's going to be D. And then after that, A. And then after that, F. And then finally after that, we have E. So you can...
Okay, so because we've come up with a couple, let's discuss why, now that they're in order, I think it might be easier to see what's going on. So we start with an oval, least like the others. Then it goes down to a circle, and then the circle gains an eye, and then it gains spikes, and then a mouth, and then a red eye, and then lots of spikes. Do we see why this is the most appropriate order to put them in? Yes. I understand where you were coming from, Frosty. Totally understand. But I hope that you understand why you were incorrect.
You could probably do that, just put them in order, looking at what characteristics they have. So the out group is gonna be the one that doesn't have any of these characteristics, or maybe one. And so basically a cladogram is gonna look like this. It's going to be a hypothesis of how these things came to be. And so I could look down here and I could say, well, right here, there's one characteristic, and that would be that there is a cell membrane. In other words, all of them have a cell membrane. And so
Okay, so everything from this point forward has a cell membrane. Do we agree? Yeah. All right, so let's do the next one. From this point forward, what does everything have?
Circular.
It is a circle. Nope, just watching and listening. All right, so the next one. What's our next stoplight? It has an eye. What about the next one?
Arrow.
It has, he calls them spikes. Should we be specific about our spikes?
4.
That's 4. All right, what's next?
Sharp teeth.
It has a mouth or teeth.
Be specific about our eye.
Ooh, should we be specific about our eye?
Red
Black
So black eye. All right, what's the difference between A and F?
eye.
Red eye.
A red eye. And then what's different between F and E?
Lots of spikes.
16 spikes.
Lots of spikes, specifically 16. I'm gonna say 4 plus spikes.
If you have black eye, then the red eye will be able to pass through.
Yeah, how's the red eye gonna get through if it has to have a black eye? How does it get in?
Then why don't we just change it to I? Do you think that would be appropriate?
Yeah.
Well then,
The eye's not really covered. No, because it's at least 4.
So yeah.
Okay.
I found it like
I figured it out before you.
No, I nuh-uh.
Yeah, I did.
So,
I was gonna say 12.
I said 16
how about-
and I was like, no.
how about more than 4?
And I said 16.
More than
That
five.
doesn't follow.
That's
Yeah, it does.
This is 4, so it has to be more than 4.
So it means that already has 4.
Do we all agree? I like the discussion. Do we all agree? Okay, so let's see if we're right. Where did my mouse go?
to show you how this is read, basically everything that branches out from this point is going to be a cell membrane. What is this branching point? Well, you can think of that as a common ancestor between all of the organisms that are on here. But if I were to go right here, this would be a circle. Or if I were to move up a little bit, what's going to be the next thing that comes? The next thing is going to be the eye. And so I could keep going all the way up. These are characteristics that are added, and we use those to make a cladogram. Now there's some interesting things you should note. So if we look at this cladogram and say that it's true, who's more related? Is F more related to E, or is it more related to A?
All right, so hold on. He's asking us, is F more related to
Hold on, look at
Oh, wait.
A or E? I want you to sit for at least 15 seconds without speaking and really think about your answer.
Wait. No.
Without speaking. All right, where are my votes for A? Where are my votes for E? Oh, all right, let's find out.
We should debate.
That's a really good question. And so basically, how do we know which it's related to? And I would say the right answer is E. You have to understand that a cladogram or a phylogenetic tree, for that matter, time is going to go in this direction. So we're going to put time on this side.
So what I want you to write somewhere in your notes, draw a very vague cladogram. It doesn't need to have anything on it, just a line and some lines going up and down. But what I want you to really emphasize is the arrow with time going up the side. Meaning that things at the bottom are old, the things at the top are young or new. And so this becomes important when we're talking about characteristic. So there was some characteristic down here that had to be cell membrane. And that characteristic was all the way down here. And then circle, then eye, then spikes, then mouth, then red eye, then Moreland, and then, you know, we could keep going. So the things that are old are down here. They line up with their characteristics or their stoplights. The things that are new have their characteristics or their stoplights up top. Does that idea kind of make sense? Do you see how time works when referring to a cladogram? Yes or no? Sam?
If there was another one, like past E, would that be more related to A than the next one, or would it be more related to?
It would be more related to the next one. Because we're going to get closer and closer in time. So if we were still looking at F, which I think is this line, if we added another one up top, F is going to be still more closely related to E. Because in time-wise, it's closer.
Would it be more related to the other one?
No, because it's up here. Good question. We good? You want to keep going? All right.
In other words, this is going to be the most ancient common ancestor, and then we're going to work progressively up. And so that means that F and E would share a common ancestor right here, but F and A are going to share a common ancestor all the way back down here. And since this is way farther back in time, we would say that F is more related to E. But this is a pretty simplistic one, and again, it's just a guess as to how it might occur. A tougher question might be, well, let's add a new one. Let's say I discover something like this. This is species H, or sub.
Species H. Where do we put species H?
In between D.
Past E.
Okay, I have a vote for past E.
No, in between D and A, because it has the spikes, but it doesn't have the eyes.
See what you did there?
Also this one. D and A.
Okay, so we have a vote between D and A. So we have a vote here. We have a vote here.
Oh, yeah.
Because it has the spikes.
You
Okay,
can't put
all
it
right.
behind.
Hey,
But
we're just
old time
making
is old.
Hey,
suggestions.
you're so wrong.
What else?
You can't put it before the I though, because it doesn't have an I, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
be passive.
Yeah, it'd have to be-
Okay, so you want to put it back between like B and G?
But it has the spikes. If you're using that logic, then that also
Then
means
it'd go, but
I you can't put it, you just put it past.
But
But it's
Put it
new
in.
time, not old
It's a
time, you know what I'm
you
saying?
can't put it anywhere. Follow what I do?
Or you can definitely put it on there.
But the mouth is the farthest to the right. Yeah, that makes more sense.
All the
I feel like it's
no
So we have 3 suggestions. Are we going with those 3 or are there any others?
Nah.
Miles.
You put it like someplace on the bottom?
Like down here?
Yeah. No, like underneath it.
Yeah, underneath the
That is the
diagram.
most wrong.
It's just chilling,
Like
right?
just
where
down
it's
here?
Yeah.
No.
Alright.
It's got to be up here.
Wait a minute, hold on, I got it. Yeah,
Sam's got it. Tell me.
hold on. So, couldn't it like branch off one of these?
It could. Which one do you think we're branch off of?
at. It makes sense.
So branch off this one?
Maybe? I don't know, hold on.
I mean, it's an idea. I'll take it.
Or if it goes.
Oh.
Sienna.
Can't they like lose characteristics over time?
Oh, Sienna's done this before. You can lose characteristics over time. So where do you think we should put it?
After E.
After E, so like up here.
So I said,
We got that one already. Is that what you mean, Sienna?
Shirley said that's it.
Right after
If we
E.
heard you say
I'd say before
So
E
like
and after
F,
F.
E, H.
So like
Yeah, like
like
that.
up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say between
So
F
if
and
they can
E.
lose characteristics, can they regain characteristics?
Totally.
Ooh.
I'd say after E.
Nah.
Because it, yeah, because it has
No.
everything that F has, but then
No.
it just loses the I.
Yeah, but the old time's
So
the old
here?
time, you know what I'm saying?
After
it
F.
before?
Yeah,
You just look
after
back at
F.
it.
After
You don't
F.
look back.
After F or
Yeah.
after F or off of F?
After F.
So here?
Yeah.
All right. Any other suggestions before we hit play?
Just
All right. Let's do it.
Of species H. where would you put this on this cladogram? And when I talk to students in class, there's 3 areas or 4 areas where they might want to add it. So some people think we should add it kind of like branching off here. Some think we should do it right here, branching off D. Some think it should be something like this, and some think it should be something like that. And so these are all plausible. In other words, these are all guesses. And we could put way more in there than this. But what's the quote-unquote right answer? Well, if I had to put this somewhere, what I would do is I would put it right here. In other words, I would have H branching off here. And the reason why is that if I were to put it way back here, before the I evolved because we didn't have that I, well, it could have occurred like that, but it would be odd that it would also evolve the same exact teeth and the same defensive spikes that we find farther up. And so a more plausible guess would be that it branched off of this A and then it lost its eye. Now, how could it lose its eye? Well, if we were to put one of these in an area where there's no light, then the eye wouldn't be an advantage. And so lots of times when we're adding a cladogram, we just add characteristics that are added, but know this, that it's just as likely to lose something that we've gained as to gain something new.
Okay, I want you to make a note somewhere that you can't lose characteristics. You can't lose characteristics. For example, if we took organism A and put it in the dark, there would be no benefit to having an eyeball, and eventually that eyeball de-evolves or unevolves. You can lose characteristics.
So this would be kind of a pretty good guess as to where H goes. And what I'm talking about now is Occam's razor.
How many of you ever heard of Occam's razor?
I think.
Okay, it's a science thing. Occam's razor. He's going to explain the word parsimony, which I wrote over there. Parsimony.
In other words, I'm talking about the theory of parsimony. What the heck does that even mean? Well, it basically means this. If all things are equal, the simplest explanation for how that occurs is probably the most right. In other words, if I come out in the morning and there's a glass of milk that's spilled in the kitchen, I could come up with a bunch of different hypotheses. It could be aliens, it could be Bigfoot, it could be a massive earthquake, or it could be my cat. And if I were to look at all of these, well, it's most likely going to be my cat. Doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that aliens didn't come down and spill my milk. It just means that it's more than likely the cat that did it. And so when you're building a cladogram, you kind of try to do that. And you try to use this idea of parsimony.
Okay, so again, I want to reiterate, the idea of parsimony just says that if there is a simple solution, that's probably solution. I can think of a couple of times where I have to put parsimony into check in my life. For example, usually when Mr. Hess leaves work, he calls me and says, do you need me to pick up anything? How are the kids? How's your day? I'm coming home soon. And if he doesn't call me by like 4:30, 4:45 when he generally leaves, my first thought is something crazy, like he got in a car accident and he's dead on the side of the road.
Very possible.
It's possible, but what likely happened?
He
He just got held over. Like he's perfectly fine at work.
Or his car won't start.
Or his car won't start. Something totally, he's probably not dead. It's probably the other thing because that's more likely, less severe. Another time is now that COVID is slowed down, if you wake up tomorrow and you have a scratchy, dry cough, you're a little bit nasally, could it be COVID?
Allergies.
Yes.
It could be, but what is it likely?
Allergies.
Allergies.
Yeah.
Okay, because if you're a good mask wearer and you're washing your hands, etc., which you all should be, is everybody, right? Else?
Michael.
Sam.
Yeah, Michael.
Don't wear it out.
You are likely suffering from allergies. It is a more simple response, a more simple answer. Okay, there's still a chance that, aliens came in and spilled his milk, but it is likely that it was his cat. Okay, that is Occam's, in science, Occam's razor says that basically the simplest and easiest way to do something is probably the way you should do it. Or in regular life, parsimony, which just means if there's a simple answer, that's probably the answer.
Idea that the simplest explanation is the best. So let me show you an example of one of these. This would be a cladogram that's created for primates. And if we look at this one again to go back, In general, in biology, we used to use all these characteristics to put organisms in a cladogram, physical characteristics, but you can imagine that's not a great way to classify life or to even show its evolutionary relationships. Today, we now have DNA, we have genetics. And so you can create a cladogram like this by just sequencing the DNA in all these different organisms and then throwing them into a computer, and it can create a plausible kind of a cladogram. And so where are you? You're right here on the human side. And so if we were to go across from the left, so if we look at these two, the lemur and the loris, they share a common ancestor right here, but they also show a distant common ancestor with all of the primates on here, all the way back here. If we were to work across to the tarsier or the New World and Old World monkeys is kind of a weird term. New World is a South American monkey. So an example could be the squirrel monkey. An Old World monkey would have a baboon. So all of these things have tails, and now we move up to the apes. The first one would be the gibbon. That would be the first vantage point. Then we have the orangutan, the gorilla, the chimp, and we could put bonobo branching off here, and then we finally have the humans. And so again, this is just a cladogram. It's a hypothesis of how these things are related. And you're looking at characteristics that are shared by all of these, but the big characteristics we're looking at now are homologous structures of DNA. In other words, where the genetics match up, that means they had a common ancestor. Does it mean that we turned from gorillas to humans? No, it just means that we had an ancestor way back at this point. And so those are cladograms, and I hope that's helpful.
Okay, how do we feel about cladograms?
Pretty easy.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy? Alright, if so,